Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. This is another one of those, they're sort of updates based on a genus or a subset of a genus, looking at my actual plants that I've got in that set and having a chat about how you might look after them, a sort of care guide, although sometimes they have to be a bit of a generalisation, which is not the best you can do. That really is because sometimes within a set of plants you can have a lot of variety, so there is no one care guide, there is no one suits all. You have to come down to individual plant levels. I mean, in some of my sections I've got cool growers and warmer growers. Well, obviously the care is not the same for those, is it? And you've got those that shouldn't dry out much and those that like to have dry spells when they're not growing, or drier spells. So you can have quite a variety, so sometimes you really do have to get down to plant level. So today I'm going to have a look at my rather poorly, in two cases, Zygopetalums. Now these should grow well. They are capable of growing well, and when you see a good one that somebody has grown well, they are quite stunning plants. Most of them have got a stripy effect on their leaves, not all. That stripy effect often comes from this certain species, but sometimes it gets bred out into the hybrids. There are quite a lot of hybrids about. I don't know how many species there are. I don't think there's a huge number, but I'm not going to put a number on it because I don't know. As far as the species in the wild are concerned, some of them are incredibly scarce. And when you start looking into the species in the wild, you start coming against the variables straight away. You've got some live down in the mangrove swamps, so constantly high humidity, damp, quite warm and shady. And then you get others live up near the treetops, bright, airy, breeze blowing, totally different environments, and yet they're still both Zygopetalums, so you've got to go careful. You can also have those that grow in cooler environments and those that grow quite warm and steamy. Yeah? So again, even the temperature range can be quite great. So I would say if you've got a hybrid that you can't identify, or you're not quite sure what's in its makeup, just aim in the middle, aim down the middle, like they always say, go down the middle. In which case you class it as intermediate, not too warm, not too cold, not too bright, not too shady, straight down the middle. As far as watering these is concerned, they will have periods when they're not growing. They're not a resting type orchid. They shouldn't dry out totally, and if they do get quite dry, they shouldn't stay like that for too long. But when they're not growing, the last thing they want is soggy media. You will rot the roots. And then we come down to the main problem with zygos. It's what's underground, those roots. They are probably amongst the most fragile roots in the orchid world. They are incredibly tender, and unlike a lot of other roots, they physically bruise, and where they bruise, they stop functioning. So you could have a root that actually looks okay, that's been bruised in several places and is not working very well. They break very easily, they can be damaged incredibly easily. So there we come round to the main problem with zygos: repotting. And I would say do it carefully, and I can't overestimate that, overemphasize that, sorry. You need to do it carefully. Now you've seen me do a phalaenopsis, hoik it out the pot, scratch, 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 bend the roots and get them in the pot, bark in, next. You do that with a zygo, you'll damage so many roots, it'll lose them. So you need to go incredibly careful. When you're taking your old media off, if it's in the slightest way stuck to the root, it stays there. Because if you pull it, you'll pull the root surface away, and then that part of the root's not working anymore. And you're liable to break the root in doing so as well. So very carefully, very, very carefully do your repotting. They don't like stale media, then not many orchids do. So you need to have a repotting regime that does the least possible damage and cause the least amount of stress. And the easiest way, I've always said, if you've got new growths coming that are starting new roots, that's a good time to repot. You know that recently I'm retracting that in a lot of cases, and I'm going to retract it in the case of the zygos. Most zygos are in the intermediate range. I'm now growing cool. It's now my winter time. I've got days only that long. I've got itty bitty days. I've got overcast, dull days. I've lost my light levels. I don't have artificial lights. So I've got very short days. We're only a couple of days away from the shortest day. So I'm in a very, very dodgy period to repot anything, quite honestly. They're going to take time to recover from a repot. There is an element of stress. And if you do it at a time when they're just not able to get any vigorous growth going, they're just going to stall. And if they stall, they're not growing. And if they're not growing, it's going to be very difficult to water and get those roots to recover, because those new roots you thought you had on those new growths are probably not going to grow. Yeah? Because of the disturbance. They may have ticked over and slowly progressed if you hadn't repotted. But disturb the roots, you stall the plant to a degree. Always, to a degree. There is no such thing as no stress on a repot. With zygos, they're going to get some. So your job really at repotting is to minimise that. Absolute minimum, the best you can. And I would say that I would not repot a zygo in winter. Because of the stress levels, I would not repot a zygo in bloom, whereas some other orchids I could be quite happy to do that, but not a zygo. I'd want my zygo to be able to give a zygo the best possible chance of a quick recovery. And to do that, I would suggest it needs doing at the beginning of the growing season, wherein, in my case, with my cooler temperatures, the plants won't be doing much at all because it's winter time. As a consequence, as the days get longer and my daytime temperatures start to rise, it should trigger some activity. Now I've just left it at activity because that could be new growths. It could be, in some cases, producing a spike. Now, they produce those in different places as well, different times as well. Or it could be some root activity reactivating, but it's most likely to have something going on as we head into the growing season. So personally, that's when I'd do it, and as minimum disturbance as possible. Now I've got three. One is actually a species, that's a recent acquisition, and as a consequence that plant's doing fine. It hasn't had a chance to go downhill yet. My other two, however, have. So we have here, I'll do pop-ups where I've got names and pictures of the blooms. They've all, the species I've got hasn't bloomed yet, so I've got no picture of that. But the two hybrids I've got have. Now this is it's down as just a hybrid, a no ID hybrid, although I'm relatively certain I know what it is. It's not a healthy plant. I do believe in this pot. It is two plants, it was split. The older part of the plant has died, so the old pseudobulbs are badly shriveled. They need to be removed, yeah? And then we look at what would be left. Now over this side we've got a bulb here, we've got a new growth that is stalled, time of year, it's just not growing. It's there. It's produced a couple of roots and it's got one back bulb without any leaves, and then it's got this miniature growth that it put on that was put on not long after it was repotted and instantly just ground to a halt. And then the other part of the plant has got a leafless back bulb, a bulb with one leaf that's quite small, and the latest growth, which has got some nice green leaves on it, although it's miniature and it's not swollen. So this is, I would say, in a bit of a bad way. It's got some roots. Many of them are old and tired. They are in effect of no use, because when this is repotted, those roots will not grow, so they will die. Yeah? As soon as those roots are disturbed, they'll die. The only ones that will be any good are the ones that are white. They're the ones that may even branch out and start growing again. So that is due for a repot at my earliest opportunity. And a lot of that is because there's a fair bit of moss in that pot, which I thought was a brilliant idea at the time. This goes back to when my idea of getting a decent root system when recovering a plant was the small bark, sphagnum moss and perlite mix. And the mix was variable depending on the amount of moss. Yeah? And this one had too much moss. Yeah? That moss is now starting to get old and stale. It's got algae on the top, needs changing, but not now. So that's that one. And then the other one is a named hybrid. This is Louisendorf, and the last bulb it grew is a beauty. Old part of the plant's gone again, shriveled up, but it's got this strange bulb here which it grew, and then it grew another one on the top, and then it had to go at doing a third one. Very strange looking thing, that. But the latest bulb is okay. It's lost a leaf, that went yellow, so I cut it off, and it has a new growth. It's also raised itself out of the pot. Yeah? So this new growth now is quite a long way from the media. However, at the moment it doesn't matter because it's not growing any roots. This needs a repot. It's got some roots, not too bad, and I don't believe this one has any moss in it. So with care, this one could be repotted. This bit will come off. That stake with the clip was to hold it steady in the pot. That's all that was for. But round here we have another very silly little bulb. That's the reason it's that deep in the pot, or not deep enough in the pot. So if we take that off, yeah, and take that off, what's left can sit on the surface of the media, and that should recover okay. I don't think I'm going to lose that. That should be okay. So that's that one. And then the latest one I got from Arthur at Burnham's at Wessex's last, I don't know what it was, the last show or the one before, but it hasn't bloomed. And it was tucked away near the back of the display. I recognised it as a zygo, and I thought, if Arthur's bought a zygo along to a show that's not in bloom, I bet it's a species. So I stuck my hand in between the other plants and got hold of it and pulled it out, and lo and behold it was the only one, the only zygo of this type. So this is Zygopetalum crinitum, however you want to say it, and it's a well-rooted plant. There are lots of roots in the pot. Coming from Burnham's, it will probably have some polystyrene chips in the bottom for drainage, and it'll just be potted in bark. I doubt if there's anything else in there. So in theory, this shouldn't stay too wet because of the type of media. It does have a nice strong new growth. That growth is still growing a little bit, but very slowly. But it is still pushing these leaves. They haven't separated properly yet. So there is a bit of movement in this. There's no sign of any active root tips, but then it's not in a clear pot. I can't see what's going on. Now, I could get away with not repotting that next year. Let's get the years right. So funny at the last at our Christmas do. Lots of people kept saying later this year when they meant next year, and lots of people, including me, kept saying last year when they meant the current year, but much further back in it. Getting all my years muddled up. Always happens this time. Anyway, so I'm hoping not to have to repot this. It's not too deep in the pot. It's the back end is a bit too deep, but it's in bark. So the bark near the top of the pot will dry fastest. As a consequence, the few bulbs that are a little bit too low in the media are not going to stay wet, because that bark at the top of the pot, the water will evaporate off of that fast. So the top of the pot dries out very quickly. Unfortunately, with a black pot, you can't see how wet the rest of the pot is. That's depending on how many roots are in there, what sort of active growth you've got, and what the temperatures and day lengths are like. So I'm looking forward to getting this one to bloom. I don't think it's going to bloom on this this latest growth here. Now you've got blooming on zygos, many, not all, start a new growth, and not long after the new growth gets going, a spike comes out. And the growth hasn't even opened any leaves yet, and then the spike will grow on, and often the new growth won't do anything until the flowers have finished. So they do vary, but most of the time the spike will come out near the base of the new growth, as the new growth is growing, not after it matures. Although some do wait till the growth matures. So that's my other one. As I say, that's my only species zygo. I have enough trouble looking after the hybrids, so hopefully this species is not going to be even more fragile. But I love the blooms and I love the fragrance. So I've lost many zygos. Over the years, I've lost quite a lot. And every now and again I say, that's it, I'm not getting any more, I can't grow the flipping things. Every time I repot one it dies. Well, I've had some successful repots since then, but I keep trying them because I like them so much. So there we go, you have to sort of make your own mind up over things like this. If you try a new type of orchid, a new genus, and it fails miserably, that doesn't always mean you've done something quite wrong. Sometimes it just wasn't a good plant. And when you've got a plant that's not strong and vigorous and healthy, and it's a little weak and a little backwards, shall we say, in coming forward, if it's not in its ideal world, then it's probably not going to flourish. That's not necessarily your fault. Trying to replicate the environments from when it's a hybrid, what environment's that then? You know, they are. It's often a guess with a hybrid. You have to, like I say, go down the middle somewhere and see where you come out. But if you've got a hybrid that's got a name, have a look and see what the species are that went into it. And I would say one of the most important things for the zygos to thrive is to get them in the right temperatures during the day and again at night, with a difference between the two, and the right sort of light levels. That gives them a good chance of thriving. And like I said, you need to go down to the species that went into your hybrid if you can and check it out. And then you may find that you've got a cooler bright light one and a swampy mango you know, bottom of the mangrove forest, hot and steamy one, and they've been hybridised together. Well, what are you supposed to do with that then? Well, same again, down the middle. Okay, that's it for today. Some of you will be wondering what happened about the Cymbidium not being in bloom. I did contact the seller, and there was a little bit of confusion. Now, I'm happy that English not being spoken as a first language can be a little confusing sometimes, and we may have got into a bit of confusing there, but at the end of the day, the original advert did say in bloom with 1 or 2 developing spikes. Yeah, that's what it said. the seller actually said what they actually meant was it was in bloom with developing spikes, not actually in flower. So they've taken the in bloom out of the expression on the website to make it clearer. I'm happy with that, so somebody else won't make the same mistake. I also explained that as far as I'm concerned, if it's got spikes and or buds, it's not in bloom until one of the buds opens. So until you've got a flower, it's not in bloom. That seems to have been accepted. So a misunderstanding, not a big deal. I don't want to make a big fuss out of it. I mean, I've bought plants over many years from this seller. I don't want to fall in out or anything daft like that. We'll put it down as a misunderstanding, and we will watch the progress of the spikes until we get those beautiful dark, almost black blooms. And I don't know whether you noticed in the picture, but yes, it's a very dark, almost black bloom, but did you notice the edging? There's a very, very delicate edging around the edge of the lip and on the edges of the tips of some of the petals and sepals. And it looks like it's been backlit. I think when we see it for real, don't hold your breath. This is a Cymbidium spike, and they can take, I would say, a minimum of 8 weeks. It could be heading towards 3 months. Who knows? Because those were, you know, infantile spikes. They've only just started, and I've certainly found with the rest of my Cymbidiums, those spikes come out like that and they sit like that for a while, and you think, are you ever going to grow? And then you look round and they're that long. And they just seem to suddenly get a spurt on. I know we're supposed to be doing zygos, but I'll stick it on the end. I'll just pick one up. Now this one's been sat with one of those short spikes for a while, and then just in the last couple of weeks, he says, overbalancing, it's done that. So suddenly the spike has really pushed on, the sheaths are splitting, and you can start to see the buds now. Now that's just happened recently. Yeah, so yeah, they seem to sit for a while and then they suddenly take off, like that one has. And I'm not going to go and get it now because Hannah's Cymbidium, the one with the virus, is currently sat on the dining room table, well away from, you know, because I keep it up in the corner of this bench, but if anything's going on anywhere near the bench or anything like that, I remove it so that it's not near any plants. But the spike on that one really has, if I just move these out of the way a minute, I'll show you, because if I put them down there, then I can bring Hannah's plant back in and put it where it goes, and in doing so we'll pass the camera, so I'll go get it. That one's pushed on really well recently. You can see all the buds. I'm not going to count them, but there is rather a lot. From this side I can see 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I'd say there's probably about 15 buds on that spike. And then round here we've got another one that's just starting to split. So yeah, so the spikes and the buds are doing really well, even though the plant should be dead really. The amount of virus it's got in it, it's awful. Anyway, it gets kept separate, gets watered separate, and when it goes out in the summertime along with the others, again it gets kept in a totally different part of the garden. So the problem is when it goes out in the garden, you've got the possibility of transferring a virus via bugs. Biting bugs, sucking bugs can transfer a virus, so they're at opposite ends of the garden. Keep them well apart. And in here, you know, as I said, they're kept entirely separate. So there we go. That's a chat about zygos. Our next meeting, our next society meeting, middle of January, we've advertised it around social media and that for non-members, to try and get non-members to come along, on the grounds that the actual talk is repotting demonstrations one of which is a zygo. I'm not doing it. I'm doing one of the mini Phalaenopsis for the people at our society that came to visit the nursery where they came from, and many went home with some, and if they hadn't already done it they'd be due a repot. So that my demo is a mini Phalaenopsis. So I'm doing one, Lynn's doing one, and our joint chairman Peter is also doing one. He's doing the zygo. So we've got 3 repotting demos, one after the other, and I'm going to get the science and technology set up. It's going to be a pain. If anybody knocks my camera there'll be trouble. But basically a repotting demo to an orchid society is an almost impossibility, because only about the front 2 rows will be able to see anything at all, and even they will be a bit far back to see it in detail. So I'm actually going to set my camera up through the gaming card into the laptop and then project it up with the projector onto the big screen, and the camera can be sat quite close in, or it can be, if it's liable to get knocked, I'll move it back a bit and use the zoom. But we should be able to get a nice close in view of the work being done, yeah, up on the big screen, so people don't need to worry about being sat back. That should be fun. Novelty, we haven't done that before at Wessex. Done it at Bournemouth, but when I was there, but haven't done it at Wessex before. But it's easy enough to set up. It's just that, you know, it does involve quite a bit of wires hanging about. You don't want any whoopsies tripping over the wires and dragging my camera off the table. Anyway, that'll do for today. We're into waffle mode. And thanks for dropping by. Thanks for everybody that watched the new orchid video. Very high number of views, very pleased about that, and comments and things, so thanks for that. And thanks for the contribution that enabled me to get that, to buy that orchid, because, you know, otherwise I probably wouldn't have. It's strange actually, because the sequence of events, I actually saw the advert on social media, on a Facebook group. There's nothing to do with the seller. Somebody else had posted that on the Facebook group, and I saw the picture of the blooms and I thought, that's nice, I wonder whose that is. And then I saw the seller and I thought, I wonder if they still got any. So I went over to the site and saw that they had, and that it was in bloom, so I purchased it. But the contribution sort of made the decision, so thanks for that. We've had a couple more since then. I haven't acknowledged those yet. That's my next job when I sit down again. But thanks for any. These are super chats that have come in recently, so thanks for those. They all go in the pot. As I say, they all go towards all of this: maintenance, upkeep, new orchids, trips to shows, all that sort of stuff. It goes in the pot. I'm sure a lot of people think it goes in Roger's wine fund, but it doesn't. It all gets kept. Not physically separate, but mentally separate. I know how much has come in as contributions, so I know what's in the pot when I'm in a position to be able to spend some money on something. I mean, sometimes I have to just, you know, down tools, like, you know, if the fan packs up or the heater packs up, that's just got to be replaced straight away. So irrespective of what's in the pot, it's got to be done. That then dips into Roger's wine fund, most annoyingly. Anyway, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.